So the Bachelor of Property, Development, Investment and Valuation. Sam's going to tell you a little bit more about the degree and about the industry as a whole. And then we'll stick around afterwards and we'll do a Q&A. In the last session, we had quite a lot of questions about work integrated learning. So I'll definitely be here to help you with answer some of those questions. But Sam, thank you very much for coming. We're very grateful that he's come on a Sunday to share his thoughts on the degree and on working in the industry. So thank you very much, Sam. Could you start by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
I will. Thank you. So, my name's Sam Cuccurullo. It's lovely to meet you all. I'm a career property manager, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. You'll see this slide. My whole 45-year career has been condensed into this one slide. So, as I said before, I was a career property manager. I started in residential and then moved into the commercial world. And I think the best idea is to really create phases of my career, and probably phases for what you should look for. Things like education. So it was an education phase that I started with, and I did that, and then that gave me a ticket to allow me to get into the industry. It wasn't the be and end all. A lot of people that start in property and do their career, they think they can be a CEO the next day. It can't happen like that. You've got to work hard to get there. So the education phase is first, and then I had a learning phase. It took many years to actually understand property correctly. Yes, I got taught it, but that's theory. You have to actually experience it. So I had a learning phase, and then I had a technical phase. I became better at it. And over time, I felt that I was reasonably okay. And then I was very fortunate then to be given leadership roles, and leadership roles to allow me to run very large groups of people. This map will show the last 15 years of my career as an Asia Pacific head for property management. They called it asset services in the companies that I was with. So you'll see that at one point I went to Hong Kong in 2010, stayed there for 5 years and ran 6,000 people in the business line. It was an extraordinary period of time, and that is the area that was my remit during that period, and then onwards. Came back to Australia. I was very fortunate to join with a fellow called James Patterson, and we started at DDZ, became Cushman & Wakefield, and we grew that business from a $5 million business to a $100-something million business. James did all of the work, I was just there to support. And then I was asked to go to Singapore to live and run Asia Pac from there, and then move to India of all places. They needed a grey hair in India as we joined two organisations together, and there was a lot of people in that Indian business, as you could imagine. So that's my career in a nutshell. Just about you now, move from me to you. What's important is that property is a whole bunch of skill sets. Ben asked me the question, put your hand up, Ben. Ben asked me the question about skill sets, or certainly his mother did, I think. But I just wanted to explain that you need to have a passion for property. I mean, if you have a passion for anything and you do the work in that passion, I think you'll be surprised at how much you can actually progress as part of your career journey. So passion, strategic thinker. I don't think you need to be that completely in property, but you certainly have to understand what happens in property to understand what's going to happen next, particularly right now. I mean, we're having interest rate increases. What does that mean? And how do you actually change the way that you do things to actually move to the next stage and make sure that you still earn the money you need to make? You need to be a little bit analytical, a knack for negotiation. I generally did a lot of negotiation, and I loved it. You have to be personable. Relationship building is a very strong part of the industry. I did an engineering, I didn't mention this before, but I did an engineering course first, civil engineering, and I didn't like it because I didn't have people that I could talk to and have relationships with. So I moved into property, and I enjoyed that very much and stayed with it. you need to be challenged quite a bit. Property is not one of those elements that can be easily understood. You need to be completely challenged with it, and you'll do well if you can just absorb that. Ambitious, I know that's in there. You don't have to be ambitious. Certainly it helps as you career growth, but I feel that everybody should have a plan, a goal as to where they want to go and what they want to do and where they want to work, more importantly. The future. So if you're in property, all of these elements. Again, Ben asked me that question about what are we actually, I is interested in property management, which is my career, but there's all of these elements in property, and I think you should be aware that property is not just one element. There's a whole bunch of elements that are certainly overlapping and strategic and synergetic together. So, David McClellan, can you just stand up one moment? Here's David, who is going to start. I actually asked David if he could help out the university. He's going to start next trimester in August, and you're going to lecture in valuation, which is an absolute difficult area of the real estate industry, and thank God David's here to lecture on that. I'm more in property management, much easier. But there are people like David that are in this course that are career experts. And David, how long have you been in the industry?
In valuation, 20-something years.
20-something years. You're only 21 by the look of you, but you've done 20 odd years in real estate. That's fantastic. So you can do all of these elements in real estate. I do want to mention one thing. One of the things about real estate, and certainly the property profession, it's the biggest employer in Australia. I don't know if you know that, which includes construction. It's 1.4 million people in Australia are in the property industry. So it's daunting in the sense that there's a lot of people in it, but also wonderful that you can have so much of a career in it. One of the things about ICMS that I really love is that you've got all these different learning options, and you can do, from the city, you can do it from ICMS campus here, which I lecture here. I'm not very far away, so I can come to it pretty easily. And you can also do it from home and online. So there's many different options. It says here that it's the best in the business. A little bit of tongue-in-cheek about best in the business, but it does have enormous capability, ICMS. And I feel that, there's a lot of active learning. The campus here is tremendous in terms, not only is it historic, but it's really got a great community feel. That's one thing I can share with you, and particularly some of the students that are in the room or thinking about becoming students. You're going to have a great community feel. If I'm in that, having some breakfast or some lunch in that cafe, there's a ping pong table there. I'll always take someone on ping pong. Love to have a game. And some of the students try and get some extra marks if they beat me. No one's done it yet. And then I think the graduate capability is really quite important. I think that the opportunity here of understanding the expertise of the industry, understanding the leadership piece. When it comes to property, you always need to be a leader in your field at some point. And whilst I've talked about ambition, and maybe some of you don't have that ambition, I think that generally 95% of the people that I've seen and students that I've seen have all got grand ambitions of what they want to do. If they want to be a property developer, or if they want to be in property management, or they want to do valuation like David has done. I think that you need to understand that you've got all of these elements and capabilities within. One of the greatest slides of this, of all of the presentations, and one that I really like, is that 90% of the people that come, 9 in 10, are given an opportunity to go into the industry that they like. And certainly in property, it's over 90%. So you're going to get an opportunity to get, after you do the course, you're going to get into the industry. And that's a big thing. I mean, you just don't want to do a Bachelor of Property and not necessarily have an opportunity to work in the property industry. So to me, that's one of the most important slides. You've got 3 years generally. Some people will delay, but generally you've got 3 years. The big thing about the ICMS course is that it does the first year, which does some valuations, does some property management, etc. But more importantly, the second year is when you do 9 months of this experience in the industry. That is a huge benefit for anybody. And then the third year you do a number of subjects, but then more importantly you do the major, which is that term 9. Again, I love a lot of elements about the ICMS. I've lectured at UTS, I've lectured at the University of Western Sydney, and I think that ICMS, in terms of having that relationship with owners and also with employers, is really quite critical for your future. These electives here are really quite interesting. Not only do you do your property subjects, but you can elect to do a 200, which is generally in the second year of your course, and you can come up with doing something very interesting instead of just doing the normal property degree. I love this about this course, that you can do site logistics, for example, as part of a real estate piece. It says there bar mixology. Some of you would probably love to do that, but the other parts are really more important for property, but that seems to be very popular for some reason, I'm not sure why. And then the year 3 also has electives, but really quite interesting electives, and I think that gives you another opportunity to do things that you may be interested in or passionate about and bring it into the subjects that you do. One of the things that surprised me, I think David's going to get a surprise when he starts in August, you walk into the classroom and people are in suits and the ladies are well attired, and I was a bit surprised when I first walked in. I thought there was a meeting going on, so I walked out of that classroom and waited for it to finish, and they were waiting for me to start, and I was a bit surprised that they were all in suits. That was one of a wonderful element that I found. I eventually came into the class and asked if I was lecturing there, and they said yes, and so we started off. But I think that gives you an element of understanding of how business is transacted by having that attire on. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the ethos at ICMS is it's a career-focused education. So we want you to be successful, and we want you to start acting like a professional from day one.
They talk about 1,000 connections with groups. Property doesn't have as many as that, to be fair, but it's much more known as a hospitality course here. But the property industry does recognise ICMS, and you've got some of the big leaders here in property, including CBRE, Dexis and a few others that are really important for the property industry to have some connections. And there's also people like David and myself and others that are lecturing that have property experience. A lot of the students, as I was saying to Ben and his mum, that if you just come to me, I might be able to ring a mate that might be a CEO of one of the organisations and then ask them to put you on, you know, in that industry experience. And I've done that quite a few times if people ask me. Undergraduate degrees, I know there's a lot of ticks, but generally the February intake, the May intake and August intake are really quite important. There's a lot of ticks of what we do here, but those 3 intakes, and it doesn't have to be just February. If my understanding is correct, you can come in May and you can come in August, and you can come in at any time during the year with those 3 intakes. And we've seen that actually. All of a sudden in August there's a whole bunch of new people that have started, which is really wonderful.
Yeah, so the February intake is our big domestic intake, because that's obviously how the Australian education cycle works. So I would say most of you will be domestic students. Definitely consider starting in February with all your mates. There's a big O week. The May intake is obviously smaller, and then September is also another big intake, but that's mainly international students. because that's the way the European cycle works, is that they start their tertiary in September. So in a couple of weeks we'll be starting our September intake, and we are expecting a big bunch of international students who've been waiting a long time to come. 50% domestic students, Australians, and 50% international students. Our international students, pre-COVID, we did a survey. They came from 52 different countries. We have a big European cohort, so that's a lot of the students that are coming. I know we have 112 Germans starting in September.
Wow.
A whole bunch of French students. So yeah, it's a real mixed bag. It's not called the International College for nothing.
If they need someone to lecture overseas, in Europe particularly, I'm very happy to go. But it'd be nice to see some international students. In property, though, in the last couple of years that I've been lecturing, hasn't been as high as that. The highest intake of students that I've seen in the classroom is the highest is 25%. But I think that it will start to grow.
Yeah, I think property is quite is
Localised.
It's an Australian degree, probably primarily for Australian property industry.
This here is all of the different degrees and undergraduate courses. The one you need to focus on is the Bachelor of Property. That's the one that I'd love to see you come in and be part of the student makeup. And that is it.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam. We are really lucky to have industry leaders coming back into the classrooms to lecture to our students. So we really appreciate Sam and all our other lecturers and our new lecturers starting. That's fantastic. Now, in the last session there were a lot of questions about the work integrated learning. And Sam's just shown us that it's usually the first, or at least it's usually in the second year, and it's 2 trimesters. I'm just going to expand on that a little bit. The way it works is that all students, when they start off, they do a subject called a pathway to success. That's one of your first subjects in your first trimester. That'll cover a lot of professional behaviour, how to set up your LinkedIn, how to conduct yourself in interviews. And then when you get into your second year, you'll start working with one of our facilitators in the work integrated learning team. You'll go to them and they will invite you in, and you'll sit down with them and you'll discuss what your career goals are, what type of company you would like to work in. Obviously with property, it'll be a property company, but maybe which sort of area you'd like to work in. You tell them what your preference is, and then they will go away and they will do their darndest to get you exactly what you want. If you, like one of our students here today, if you already have experience in the industry, you could possibly get RPL for that. That's recognition of prior learning. They are proper subjects. So you do get credit points for completing your work integrated learning. You do have to do some assessments during your work integrated learning, and your boss needs to fill out some paperwork as well and give you an evaluation, and that is all part of it. But yes, this student who's already got some experience in the industry might be able to get RPL for these subjects, provided they do align exactly with the course and with your career goals. So does anyone else have any other questions? Yep.
I was just wondering, from a valuation perspective, do you come out with any accreditation and become a valuer, a recognised valuer with the industry bodies that certify that sort of thing?
I can probably answer that, if that's okay. So this is a Bachelor of Property Investment, Development and Valuation. If you want to be a specific valuer, you do need to go and do that special accreditation on top of your degree. You will obviously get an introduction to valuation, but this isn't a course that will teach you specifically, well, it'll teach you, but it won't accredit you specifically to become a property valuer. It's more focused on the development, the investment, and the valuation as part of it. It's a business degree. Most of our degrees don't have any exams. Property has a couple of exams because of the valuation aspect to it, it's a slightly longer than some of the other degrees because, again, with the valuation piece to it, that is a very important part of the piece. But for specialised qualifications like real estate or valuation, that would be something you would do after your degree normally with the background, if that was something you were interested in going into that area. Yeah. Good question. Any other questions? Yep, so I might just tell you that your work integrated learning in the second year doesn't necessarily have to be completed in the second year. A lot of students elect to do it at the end of their degree, and the reason they do it at the end is because they can work full-time and they will usually stay. So, for example, one of our students just got a role at CBRE, and I said, "Oh, but hang on, you're still studying in your third year." And he said, no, I'm doing my industry training. I opted to do it at the end because they wanted to offer me a full-time job. So you take the full-time job, but you have to complete those assessments in order to graduate, but then he's already in the job, he's done his training. So that's one advantage of putting your work integrated learning at the end of your course if you wanted to do that. Yeah, could I? Yeah.
It's just a question about exchange. Do you have any potential for exchange programs?
Yep, good question. We do have a couple of universities in America which we do exchange programs with. You will notice, as I said, in September, a lot of international students will be coming. A lot of them will come as study abroad students, and they're not necessarily exchange. But they are study abroad students, and they'll come and they'll just do usually anywhere from one trimester up to a year, and you obviously have those options of doing this study abroad with one of our partners overseas. Yep, so that's definitely something you can think of later on. Yeah.
Also, I saw that you can condense it into 2 days per week so that you could work the rest of the week. Is that?
Yes, so that our timetabling department work really, really hard to ensure that everybody gets a 2 or 3 day timetable. Obviously, it depends what subjects you choose, but generally we try not to have lectures on a Thursday and Friday. Because students often like to work, and so we do try. Are you a current student? Sorry, can I just ask you, what is your name?
Max.
Hi, Max.
Hello.
And Max, can you tell everybody about your timetable?
Also, my timetable is Monday and Wednesday, which is great because I do my Monday, then Tuesday I spend the day or the afternoon, whatever, doing the work I had on Monday.
Stand up.
And then on Wednesday, I have my 2 other subjects, because I do 4 subjects a trimester. And because of that, the rest of the week I can do, for example, I'll take Thursday, Friday, do my assignments. And then I have the rest of the weekend, if I want, I can go out, I can do work, I can work with people, like, for example, down the hall, I've got people who are like doing business with, which is pretty cool. So because we only have 2 days a week, it gives you time to do whatever else you want to do with your own time.
Just a little bit more on that, because what happened in some of the classes that I take, I asked the students if they're working. They're not necessarily working in property, but they are working 2-3 days a week, and so they catch up like Max on the weekend rather than going out, Max, and doing that bar and all that other stuff you do. It's more about making sure that they work 2 or 3 days during the week, and a lot of them do it. In one class, everyone was working, not necessarily in property, but elsewhere.
Generally, ICMS students are ambitious and hardworking. I might add that the lectures and tutorials are slightly different from the big traditional universities. When you come in to your lecture, you stay for your tutorial straight afterwards. It's basically one class. So instead of having a lecture for that subject on a Wednesday and then a tutorial on a completely different day, they are actually combined into one big block, which is a much more effective way of doing it. And I suppose the difference is that we don't talk so much about tutorials because you do have your lecturers there for you the whole time, and you are able to email your lecturers and ask questions. There isn't really any need to run around and kind of relearn everything by yourself from somebody else. Any other questions?
You mentioned about not being a lot of exam-based. So what kind of, particularly I guess on the property side, what kind of assessments and criteria do you use as part of your evaluation for your students?
Yeah, good question. Now, I don't know very much exactly, but our learning and design, our course designers are very strong in the belief that students should learn real-world assessments. So in the real world, your boss doesn't say, please sit down and write an essay for 3 hours on everything you know. That just doesn't happen. You're asked to do practical things. You're asked to provide a report, do a group assessment, put together a project plan. So these are the type of assessments that they do. If you go onto each subject page, and this is all on the website, you'll see that there's a combination of group assessments, there'll be a project, and there's a weighting for each subject. So for example, one subject might have a report that's weighted 30%, a group assessment which is weighted 40%, and so you can plan it out. We don't generally do exams except for 1 or 2 of the specialised evaluation subjects where you do actually need the exam as part of your industry profile, I suppose. But generally, I mean, Max, sorry to come back to you, you might know a little bit more. So can you give us an idea of what some of your assessments are like?
So for example, I have about 3 to 4 assessments for each subject. So the last one I did was an accounting one where I was in a group of 3. We had to take a surf school and then completely redesign it. We have to do all the Excel sheets for accounting, have to come up with all the budgeting, have to come up with everything. So instead of just having been given a book, being like, learn this, then like write it down in 2,500 words, it's, we give you this, like we give you a business and you have to create a system for yourself that hypothetically making it better. So for example, in the last trimester, I had one for accounting, so not for accounting, for marketing. And we had to come up with a whole new design branch for Dyson. So we had to market it to a certain group and find out its marketing, what is it, how sustainable can the marketing be? And then in the end we created like a security camera, a Dyson security camera, and the whole design of it was like you wouldn't steal a vacuum because we're trying to sell to millennials. And then there's different people, they did lawn mowers, they did everything. So it's, you get to be creative, you get to do what you want, but it's still directed in the sense of you learn. So it's, and then there's obviously ones where it's just write a report on your own, and it's also great to learn that because it's a necessity.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, what we had in 2020 was more exams at the end, and they've asked us to change. So I developed a couple of the subjects. They asked me to develop. So what we have done now in those subjects, particularly in the property management one, property and asset management, and also in the property development subject that I teach, is that we do parts of quiz. So you do an online quiz, maybe 15 to 30 questions, and very small amount of marks, 15% of the total marks. And then what we try and do is part 1 and part 2 of an assessment, and part 1 leads into part 2 part. And for example, in the property asset management, there's a city block that I ask them to look at potentially to either redevelop or possibly refocus on as an example of what we do. And that's a recommendation to the lecturer who is seen as the fund manager that makes the decision whether that's going to be done or not. That gives you an example.
Thank you. Another great question. Thanks. So any more questions? Right, okay. If there's no more questions, feel free to approach Sam afterwards. Max, thank you for being here. Stand up if you want to get a, if you don't mind standing up, but if you want to speak to a student, I'm sure Max wouldn't mind if you went and asked him some questions. Otherwise, feel free to go out to the barbecue and have some lunch. Will just give a little plug. I'm giving a session in classroom 13, which is up on, if you take the lift up to level 2, on scholarships. The scholarships are a big part of a very important part of ICMS. So that starts at 1 o'clock in classroom 13. If you can make it, I'll see you there. Thank you.